I'm going to yell at you. Well, not really. But what I am going to do is talk about something that's a big pet peeve of mine that I run into all the time. And I can't speak for her, but I know she runs into it all the time too. And it's very annoying when it comes to what we do. See, I know we're a martial arts and parkour studio, but a big part of what we do is what we call the teammate skills curriculum. That is essentially helping people understand how to apply character development and coping skills into their life. Things like discipline, perseverance, integrity, and of course, respect, which is something that gets thrown around as a buzzword all the time. But I see a lot of y'all are using this word, but I don't think y'all really know what it means. Or I don't know, because we run into this all the time. I actually got into an argument with a guy on my social medias the other day because this dude was outright describing child abuse, physical child abuse, as a method to teach respect. And see, that's the thing. See, a lot of these people, a lot of y'all out there are confusing fear with respect. Fear and respect are two completely different things. And I'm going to tell you later in this video exactly why using fear to modify the behavior of your children is not only ineffective, but absolutely will backfire on you. Because we've been studying this since the 1960s. There is no excuse for us as adults and parents and otherwise to not understand this concept. So I am going to spell it out in this video. But before I do, let's start with the definitions, right? See, a lot of people want to intimidate somebody or put down somebody or be mean to somebody and then say, well, I need to teach them to respect me. No, you want to teach them to fear you. Let's be honest about what you're really doing. You're not trying to get their respect. You're trying to get their fear. And that is a hugely different thing. I know I'm making up words now.
But no one wants to say that. No one wants to say, I want them to be scared of me so they don't do
Yeah, because they know it sounds bad. So they use the keyword respect because it doesn't sound as bad. But let's talk about respect, shall we? Respect can be used in two different ways as a word. It can be used as a noun or it can be used as a verb. Now, we can get into transitive properties and all that in some other discussion. Let's just focus on the noun and verb part, right? The most common definition of respect in use as a noun is essentially a feeling of admiration for somebody's achievements or character or abilities or something like that, or it can be for an object as well. So what we mean by that is, like, I don't have to like my opponent as a person. I don't have to love them as a person. I can hate the guy that's my opponent and still have an admiration for his ability to fight, right? So I can still have respect for someone's fight ability and not like them at all. Same way as I can have respect for someone's honesty, but that doesn't mean that I care about them as a person or that I like them as a person or anything like that. And this definition of respect, what's up, Roman? This definition of respect always annoys me because I've met my idols before. Yeah, it's good to see you, Roman, Jen Clips. So I've met some of my idols before, and I'm here to tell you it's not as cool as, like, you think it's going to be, you know? I remember meeting one of my idols only for them to try to spend an hour telling me how to run my business and telling me that if I didn't follow their way of doing things, that I was going to be a failure. I wish I'd have never met them. Right? I looked up to this person, right? So when I talk about modeling your behavior off of a role model, I tell my students not to use real people. I tell them to use a fictional character or a character that they come up with in their head. So when we're talking about respect, we could be talking about admiration for someone's abilities or achievements, but let's get to the next definition, because we could also be talking about showing consideration for other people's feelings, rights, or property. So for example, a lot of people talk about respecting the law. So that's a consideration for the law. Respecting other people is a politeness or consideration for their rights, their feelings, or their property. So that having respect for someone's stuff is an understanding that I don't want someone to break my stuff, so I'm not going to abuse or break someone else's stuff, right? Guys, that's also respect. See, a lot of people don't really fully understand what this means. Another use of the word respect as a noun is to be tolerant or accepting of differences in other people, as in, I might not like that person, but I respect the culture that they live by. I respect the culture they come by. I show empathy, but I do not show empathy. That's a complicated one, Frank. All right. Hey, man. And another way to use respect as a noun is for formal greetings. Now, if we're using respect as a verb, right, obviously we can go back into the first one of to admire someone for their quality or qualities or achievements. But the main reason I talk about respect and using it as a verb is to be cautious about something, right? So to respect someone else's privacy is to be cautious about protecting their privacy, for example, right? Or to try not to do anything wrong. So for example, if someone sets a boundary and you respect that boundary, that's you trying not to cross someone else's boundary, right? That is all the base definitions of respect. So we're starting there. I'm thinking about showing, okay, what? Oh my gosh, man. Oh, that sucks. Now, without knowing you personally, I'm just going to call you Cook. Without knowing you personally, I can't really give you any great advice, but that does sound like a crappy start to your year. That's awful. But without knowing any details about the situation or anything, I don't really have much advice other than understand that if you turn yourself into the bad guy or become the confrontational one, that can be used against you in court later. I just need you to understand that, right? Like, so if you're talking about your wife took the kids, whatever it is, I don't know what the reasons are. I don't know anything about you or your history, and I'm not going to make any assumptions. But I will say this: the more aggressive that you get and the more confrontational you get, the more that's going to get used against you in any further custody proceedings or anything like that. So it's absolutely in your best interest to try to stay. I know it's impossible to be emotionally level-headed, but like to try to stay as level-headed as you can in your actions, things like that.
Plus, your kids see that. Like, your kids see you being aggressive. If you're aggressive, I understand you're emotional. That's fair. But your kids are going to see you being aggressive, and that's going to create a fear response.
That's not gonna go well either. Now, Frank, to move on, empathy is your ability to experience something that someone else is experiencing. So if she is sad and I am talking to her, my ability to feel sadness with her would be empathy. Now, sympathy, on the other hand, would be if she's sad and I'm not, but I feel bad that she is sad, that is sympathy. So they're very close, similar to each other, but sympathy and empathy are just slightly different, right? Set physical boundaries, don't like people touching me. Oh yeah, no, that's cool. I do the same thing. I can't stand being touched, right? I don't like, and I'm in a fight sport, so I know that sounds weird, but I'm not a big fan of people touching me and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of hugs and stuff. But that has back to my upbringing, you know. All right, so back to what we were talking about. A lot of people keep using the word respect, but they don't really know what it means, right? So now we've defined what respect means, both as a verb and as a noun, and we have found out that fear plays no factor. So when I talk about respect with kids, I always talk about, like, do you have to like a car to respect the damage it can do to you enough to check both ways before you cross the street? That type of thing, right? And or do you have to like somebody to admire that they have a great sidekick or a great footwork or something like that, right? Because it'd be a really bad idea for me to walk into a combat sport ring. It would be a really bad idea for me to walk into a combat sport ring without any consideration for the skills the other person has. That is probably the second fastest way to lose a fight. First fastest being to talk about it. If you're going to fight, fight. Don't stand there and tell people what you're going to do. That's the fastest way to lose a fight. But that's beside the point, right? So now that we've defined respect, let's get into this conversation I had with somebody the other day. This person was describing straight out child abuse. Now, I'm not talking about like a little physical discipline, as in maybe a kid does something and the consequences for doing it was running laps or doing exercise or a light tap on the leg, stop that kind of thing. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about switches and coat hangers, and I'm talking about like beating kids into submission. This guy was describing beating kids into submission as a way to teach them common sense and respect. Now, first of all, common sense is another one of those words that people use often incorrectly, because the thing about common sense is, oh, what's up, Katie? The thing about common sense is that everybody's idea of common sense is different. I don't know if y'all guys realize this yet, but everybody's definition of common sense is different. So like to a contractor, certain things about building a project are common sense, but to someone who doesn't build projects like that, I was an automotive guy. The things that they see as common sense are not the things I see as common sense. The things I see as common sense are not the things they see as common sense. But back to what this guy was talking about. What he was really talking about is beating a child is to the point that they are so scared to be themselves and act around them that they do not break the rules. Now let's get into this a little bit, shall we? I said we've been studying this since the 60s, and clinical psychologists have, and I'm not kidding. We have. So one of the first studies that was done about it, and the one I like to talk about the most often, is this. I don't want to describe the whole thing and waste too much of y'all's day, but basically what they did is they had one group of kids who came from authoritative physical discipline households, spankings, hit with the belt, that kind of stuff, right? Back then it was a lot more acceptable, even though we know better now, right? So they had this group of kids that was like that, and they would put the kid and the parent in a room and put toys in front of them. I think it was like 4 toys, 5 toys was part of the test. And they would basically have the parent say, hey, you can play with these 4 toys all you want, but the big shiny best toy of them all, you can't play with that. If you touch that one, I'm going to beat you, right? That's what they were told. Now, in those kids, whenever the authoritarian was around, the kids were highly unlikely to touch the toy they were told not to touch. But the second they took the parent out of the room and the kid was there by themselves, over 92% of the time, the kids immediately went to play with that toy and then made sure it was all put back before someone else came in the room. And almost 100% of them, it wasn't quite 100%, but almost 100% of those kids then lied about it to their parents. Right? So this is what I mean when I say punishments create liars. I've been saying this for years, right? So punishments create liars. And that's exactly what I mean. We've studied this for a long time. Now, they took another group of kids who came from households that used different types of discipline outside of physical, right? So in the second group, a lot of these parents told their kids, hey, you can play with these 4 toys, but please don't touch this one, because this one belongs to somebody else and we don't want anything to happen to it. We want to respect other people's stuff because we want people to respect our stuff. Now, those kids, only like 2 of them, when the parent left the room, touched that toy. The rest of them simply did not play with it. And when asked why later, they said it was because, well, they wouldn't want somebody messing with their stuff when they weren't around, so they were going to respect other people's property, right? So this study was the first in a series of studies that eventually led to us understanding that it is far better for a child's character development to help them learn to make good decisions because they're good decisions and why they're good decisions, or help them learn to follow rules because they understand why the rule is there, than it is to beat that fear into them, in which time they're going to become rebellious, resentful, often leads to bad relationships with their parents as adults. This often also leads to these children growing up to be adults who think it's okay to just smack somebody because they disagree with them, or because somebody didn't follow a rule or something like that, right? So there's a lot of detrimental things that can happen with a child's development. Now, I'm not saying this is an every time type of thing. We're humans, but I am talking about statistically here. So vast majority of the time type thing. So when I approach things with my son, and I'm not saying I haven't made mistakes, and I approach my students the same way, if I have a rule on the floor, or if I have a rule at home, I explain exactly why that rule is there, why it's important we follow it, right? And kids, and I know you work with the little ones, the 4 to 6 year olds, the vast majority of the time, if we can help a kid understand why a rule is there, they won't break that rule. Mm-hmm. They won't. They understand it. Or if they start to break that rule, give them, remember, we don't want to break this rule because this could happen, this consequence could happen, then, oh, yeah, I forgot, right? And that teaches kids to make the right decisions, or good decisions, better decisions, because they want to, rather than because they're afraid of punishment. Like, if I choose to do something or believe something because I'm afraid of punishment, then I don't feel like that is a real belief. I don't feel like that's a real choice if I'm doing it because I'm afraid of getting hit or because I'm afraid of punishment, right? Now, if I choose to do something because I think it's the right thing, that's, in my opinion, a morally better position or ethically better position to find yourself in, right? Which is what I'm talking about. Yeah, people are born liars. I'm not saying people don't lie. What I'm saying is that the harsher the physical punishments, the more likely the child is to do the thing anyway and then lie about it. Versus when they're given a reason for that rule that's not, well, because I said so, but when they're given a reason to act a certain way and they are convinced to make a better decision because it's the right thing to do, then they'll more likely make that better decision when the authority is not there, right? Versus people that are physically punished for it are more likely to make the right decision while the authority is there, but will turn around and tempt fate and push the boundaries when they don't think they'll get caught, and then we'll turn around and lie about it later. Like I said a little bit ago, right?
And I categorically disagree that we are born liars. We are taught to be liars.
Well, we learn it. We learn
it.
Yeah.
Our feelings, our emotions, our actions that go counter to what anyone else says, or what an authority does not or does like, could be punished. we are creatures who avoid punishment just like any other creature. So no, we create our own liars.
Well, may I add something into that? Because I'm also of the camp that while honesty is 90% important,
of the time.
that while honesty is important, there are also times to lie, right? Like lying by itself is not always like the worst thing in the world. Now, I hate lying and I hate liars. But sometimes we use little lies to cheer people up or to try to help somebody or to protect somebody's privacy or to protect somebody's safety or things like that. So I'm not one of those people that's going to say it's always wrong to lie. And I've never taught my kid that it is always wrong to lie. I've taught him that honesty is the best policy, but there are times, empathetically, that lying can also be a very useful tool to doing good, right? And I know that sounds really weird to say.
We are taught that through social circumstances.
Right.
It's not that we are born and we, start talking and all we do is spit out lies. That's not how that works.
Yeah, no. And let me define lies a little bit too. Like if someone says something that is not true or inaccurate, but they believe it to be true and inaccurate, I don't consider that person to be per se lying. They're just misinformed, and so they are misinforming. But in their head, they think or believe that they are telling the truth. And so I'm not calling that person a liar. What I'm saying is some people are misinformed. And we need to remember that there's a difference there. Yeah. So what I'm really getting at here, though, is stop confusing fear with respect. Mm-hmm. Stop saying, well, if we could punch people in the face more often, it would teach more respect. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. It would teach fear. That's what it would teach. And let's think about this. You really want to live in a world where every time someone disagrees with you, or anytime someone speaks to you and you didn't want them to, or that they just get punched in the face, right? Because that makes adults who are afraid to socialize. And I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but humans are biologically designed to be social creatures. Like a lot of our mental health is related to our ability to feel like a part of something, like a part of a tribe or a part of a culture or something like that. That's why it's so easy to manipulate people. That's why it's so easy to misinform people, is because if you can make people feel like they belong to something, if they believe a certain thing, even if that thing is completely not true and could never be true, well, they're going to go ahead and believe it wholeheartedly because they want to believe in their tribe or in their culture or this thing or place they feel like they belong. And then once they want to belong more than they care about the reality or the truth of it, they become easily manipulated into doing all kinds of terrible, heinous acts. I mean, look at Germany in the 30s. Look at Italy in the, gosh darn it, Mussolini. When was he in power? Y'all get my point, right? Y'all get my point. So if you go back and look, this is how... Time frame. Yeah, the same time. It was the same time frame. My bad. So when you go back and look at it, this is how large groups of people get I don't want to use the term indoctrinated. That's not what I'm really trying to say. Manipulated. That's how large groups of people get manipulated. Now, go ahead.
Think about it this way, too, okay? Y'all want to walk around just being able to slap and punch and hit people whenever they say things that you don't like.
But the first time you get punched in the face, you want to cry and call the cops. That actually happened to me once. Just saying. Dude wanting to be physical, wanting to threaten me, wanting to punch me, and then he gets clocked. And then starts crying and call the police. He assaulted me, right? The same people. It's the same people. All right, go ahead and finish your point.
But then, and you treat your kids that way. Mm-hmm. And when they say or do anything you don't like, you physically punish them. Then they get in trouble for doing the same thing at school. Some little kid says that they don't like their darn lollipop or whatever it is, and so they haul off and smack the kid. And then you're having to get on to them for doing the exact thing you taught them to do to show you respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
How hypocritical is that?
Yeah, and so the kids kind of grow up with this concept. The kids grow up with this concept that to teach respect is to make someone fear you or to intimidate someone, and that is just not... It's not good. So like I said about that study, we've known for like over 60 years now that when raising a child, look, if you're a parent, right, it's really easy to become a parent. Like really easy, right? Scary easy to become a parent. But if you're going to become a parent and you are going to take responsibility as you should, then it is also your responsibility to seek out the best information, to do the best job you can possibly do in guiding that child to be a good and functional member of society.
And confront the fact that you might be wrong and how you were taught might not have been the best ways for now. It might have been the best your parents could do, but you can do better.
Yeah, and the place to start is with yourself. The place to start isn't with the discipline of your kids. The place to start is the example that you set. And then also reaching out and reading into childhood psychology, childhood behavioral therapies, things like that, because you might, oh, my kid's not autistic. Why would I need to look into therapy? I'm not saying go to therapy. I'm saying read about the therapies, because the thing is these therapies are used with all these different children because they're effective. They're also effective on children who do not have behavioral issues, who are not autistic. Those therapies are still effective for those kids. So I'm not saying send your kids to therapy. What I'm saying is educate yourself on these practices that therapists use to help children with difficult behaviors, and you can use very similar things to help your children learn to act right in society and still be confident to be themselves and not afraid to speak their mind, right?
And the thing is that if you build a relationship with your kid on trust, I'm not talking about you gotta be their friend. I love my son. I'm not his friend yet.
It's trust, though.
I'm not his friend yet.
I do the different hats thing. I'm like, okay, right now I'm just going to be a friend, but if he steps out of the line, I go back and I put the guide hat on.
I mean, do I let him be him? Do I let him say things that are age appropriate for him and talk to me about it? Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, I'm still guiding him through his teen years. And I want a relationship built on respect, where he feels comfortable coming to me and saying whatever he needs to say without feeling fear of being punished just because he's a kid and I'm an adult.
Like if a kid does something wrong and it turns into a really chaotic mess of a situation and they really need their parents' guidance, they might be afraid to talk to that parent because they'll have to admit that they did something wrong in the first place, which can lead to them being punished, right? And so, you have to allow space for your kids to feel comfortable to tell you about their mistakes, to tell you about the things they messed up. And the way I usually do that, and I did a recent podcast on this, so I don't want to make it like a big topic here, but is understanding discipline, right? And understanding that consequences are far better than punishments. And what I mean by that is consequences that make sense to the crime, right, are far better than just some sort of punishment because they broke a rule. So when I have a rule in my classes or whatever else, I might say, hey kids, this is the rule. And if I catch you breaking the rule, this is the consequence. So if the rule is talking while I'm talking or talking over me as the instructor, the consequence is if you keep talking over me, I'm going to have to keep stopping the class, which means we're not going to get to play a game at the end of class. We're going to have to work the rest of class and not get a fun moment for that last 5 minutes, right? So that's a consequence that relates to the action rather than if you don't follow this rule, you're going to get spanked, or if you don't follow this rule, you're going to get in timeout, or if you don't follow this rule, you have to sit still. Now, I don't do that. I do consequences that relate to the rule, right? If you don't clean up your room, then I'm going to clean up your room. And if I clean it up, then anything I think looks like trash, I'm going to throw it away, even if it's your prized possessions. See what I'm saying, right? That's a real world consequence, And I find that is far more effective. And remember, we work with kids. We work with hundreds of families. We have worked with, I did some math the other day. Believe it or not, we have worked with over 45,000 families since we started doing this.
Which is crazy.
That's insane. That is utterly absurd. I couldn't believe it when I was doing the math. And it's effective. It's helpful. But when we're going to talk about respect, let's be clear about what we really mean. If you think teaching someone to be afraid of breaking a rule is respect, you're sadly misinformed. You need to understand that isn't respect, that's fear, that's intimidation. Respect is something that I give everybody, and I feel like should be given to everybody. Common politeness, common decency, common respect for people's rights. It's just given. Now, I do let people unearn it, though. You start being I hate that I have to censor myself on this podcast. You start acting out of hand, I might lose respect for you. Now, when I lose respect for you, that doesn't mean I'm going to berate you or attack you or anything like that. If I lose respect for you, you just simply won't hear from me anymore. You reach out to me, I won't answer. You try to stop and talk to me on the street, I'll smile and nod and walk on. If I've lost respect for you, then you simply don't exist to me.
But to me, that's not losing respect, because you're not then treating them badly.
I'm just not treating them like a person. I'm treating them as if they don't exist.
To me means that they lost your trust.
Yeah. They lost my trust, which means they lost my respect. Because I only respect, people I know I can trust.
And this is where we disagree, is even if I can't trust somebody, like, I don't like them, we don't get along, if they're in a burning building, I'm still going to respect them enough to run in and pull them out.
Well, yeah, no, when we're talking about that, yeah, absolutely.
So I take that respect definition just a little bit farther, where you don't lose or earn my respect. You have it, but if I can't trust you, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to be around you. I'm not going to communicate with you because I can't trust you.
Well, and like we said, using respect as a noun, often we're talking about an admiration of a quality somebody has, or a character thing somebody has, or whatever. I can absolutely lose respect for somebody, and to the point that I will not view or treat them with the same common decency you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, I will drop all my politeness and common decency with you if you've lost respect with me. But like I said,
keep it professional.
Right. But like I said, respect is something that should be given at any given time. And I'm not saying the definition using admiration, saying that admiration should be given at every time. When I say respect should be given at every time, I'm talking about showing consideration for other people's rights, feelings, property, that sort of thing. Tolerant for the fact that they are different, that type of thing. Or being careful not to step on other people's boundaries. That's what I mean when I talk about respect. So if you lose my respect, you basically lose not so much my admiration of a skill or whatever, but you lose my politeness. You lose my tolerance at that point, and I'm going to start checking you, or I'm just going to ignore you. 100%.
I will respect you enough to check you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it always starts with that, right? Like, look, y'all, on my page, especially on Facebook, it happens on YouTube some too, but especially on Facebook, man, it is not uncommon for me to have 1 or 2 posts every month or two that get 300 comments plus. And I don't know what it is about when a post of mine gets over about 70 comments that makes other people see the post and just get mad that it has so many comments and get in and say the most disrespectful things. And I will politely check you one time. You do that, I'm going to check you one time. I might even write you an essay. I know that's weird, but it's kind of just something I do to explain my point of view. If you keep on and begin to become inappropriate, then you lose my respect. You lose your space on my comment feed. You're blocked, and I just pretend I go on about my life like you don't exist because I don't got no time for you, right? If you're not willing to have a reasonable discussion, right? You don't have to like someone to respect them enough to have a reasonable discussion without being violent or mean or angry. But we were mostly talking about parenting when it comes to respect. That was kind of what we were getting at. And the thing to remember is teaching your children's respect is to teach them consideration for other people, not fear of what they might do to them, but consideration of them because they would expect that same consideration back. You would want to raise your kids to have that consideration, that respect for somebody, because they would want that respect back, because that is a good reason to show respect for somebody. That is a good why behind it, which is why I say never run away from the question why. If you're a parent and you tell me that the most annoying question your kids ask you is why, then I start questioning your parenting abilities. I do. Because why is the most important question you have to learn how to answer when it comes to being an adult or manly or a man or whatever. You have to be able to set boundaries. You have to be able to set rules. You have to be able to set appropriate consequences to go with those rules. This is all just part of being a parent, right? And if you're not willing to do any of that and you just want to use fear, then maybe you shouldn't have done what you did. You know what I mean? So that's a big part of it, right? Take responsibility to help this generation be better. And we can help this generation be better in a way that we've never been able to before, because we only really started studying behavior around the 1940s, right? 1920s to 1940s is when we started. But it didn't really take off until the 60s and 70s. So we've really only been studying how different actions and experiences affect our behavior long-term throughout life until recent times. But now we've built a lot more of an understanding about that allows us to better raise kids to be better adults. And that's all I'm getting at here. So but do not come into my comments talking about smacking kids across the face with a belt to teach them respect, because I will absolutely fight you over that. I don't fight for no reason, but like my belt says, peace warriors still fight for a cause. I'll fight you over that one, whether verbally or otherwise.
I've had wooden spoons, wooden yardsticks.
The worst one to me was
leather whips, leather belts used on me.
Yeah, whips were bad.
I will bow up to you every time about that. Do not hit a baby.
And coat hangers was the one that drove me, like, that I really hated. That was the one I was really afraid of when I was little. Like, I still have memories of, like, cowering in a corner to the coat hanger and all that.
I had friends that were beat with electrical cords.
And ask me if that taught me respect for my parents, because it didn't. Now, fact of the matter is, though, I only had one parent that did this. And that parent has been estranged from me for decades, and I will not speak to them. My other parent never laid a hand on me except for one time. Well, he didn't really.
You might have deserved it.
I might have deserved it. And I was more of an adult. I was like 16 at that point, so I don't count that. But as a child, my other parent didn't raise their hand to me at all. They pretended to one time. That's a different story I'll tell at the end of this. But that parent I was able to rebuild a relationship with as an adult, and we were relatively close. Not as a parent-child relationship, but more as peers throughout my adult life until that parent died. That parent passed away 2 years ago, and so I don't have them with us anymore. The other one, though, used physical punishments, and it created a lot of resentment. Here's the other thing about physical punishments. Like I said, they don't always work. It'll work while you're there, but the second you leave, they're going to do the thing anyway. I did that, right? When I was a kid, I did that. But then I would get caught again eventually, right? Get caught again eventually. And then I would get beat worse. And then I get caught again eventually. And then I get beat worse. And it escalates. So when you start to realize that the spanking didn't work, you might move on to the belt. When you realize the belt's not working, you might move on to something more severe. Or what my parent did, it escalated all the way to them pulling a kitchen knife on me when I was 12 years old. See, the thing about it is that physical discipline, when you realize it's not working and the kids are lying and doing it behind your back anyway, you don't know what else to do. So you escalate the physical discipline. Then it happens again. You don't know what to do. So you escalate the physical discipline, which led to one of my parents pulling a knife on me at 12 years old. Did not turn out well for them. I left the house that day. That was the day that I walked out of that house and I never went back. I was 12 years old and I ended up with my other parent down the road, who I hadn't seen in 6 years at that time. Now, the other parent, after that point, there was never any physical discipline. Now, there was one time before my parents split that my mom threatened the spanking to me and my brother, and I got scared, and my brother convinced me to run away when my dad got home. He ran too. Now, he gave in, the coward. We were like 9 and 6. But he gave in and eventually went back and took his whooping, right? And then it became all about me having to go in, and I was so scared. And I went in, and my dad takes me into a spare room and he sits me down and says, "What'd you do wrong? You know, this is why you shouldn't do that," stuff like that. And I broke down in tears. I was like, "I don't want to get hit." I remember my dad chuckling and going, "I wasn't going to hit you. I'm not going to smack you." I was like, "But I was going to get a spanking, Mom said." And he goes, "Oh," he's like, "all I need you to do is just sit there real quick." And he starts clapping his hands. "I told you not to do that. It'll happen again if you keep messing up." And then he smiled at me, gave me a thumbs up, and sent me out the door. Like, it's a weird memory, but it's kind of a weirdly fond memory that I have. Because it kind of felt like my dad standing up for me. And it was the only time in my life I really remember my father standing up for me. That was my one issue with him. Anyway, I got into a personal story.
But also, the sad part of that is that why are you making your child wait hours and hours and hours for someone else to come home and physically discipline them? By then, they've forgotten why.
It was because she couldn't catch us.
No, but that's not the point. I know you remember.
Yeah.
But most kids become so disconnected from the event that by the time it comes back around, they're not actually, they might remember that thing happened, but they don't remember why they're getting in trouble and why this parent, who they haven't seen all day, who they should be excited to see, is now physically hurting them.
Yeah, and it's it comes down to understanding
it puts the other parent in a really bad position.
And it comes down to understanding appropriate consequences, appropriate punishments, if you will. But we've said everything we need to say on this subject. But it's one of my big pet peeves. So many people throw the word respect around without any real knowledge of what it means. Most people know to a certain extent it means to admire, but that's not really it. And that's only one of the definitions, is to admire someone for their characteristics or skills. One of the other definitions as a noun, like I said before, is simple politeness and human decency or consideration for someone else's feelings or privacy or property or something like that. That is also respect, right? So let's not confuse respect and fear anymore. Okay? Especially So until we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be, and be the best at being you.